Camilla and William have a complicated relationship. According to author Christopher Anderson, he tolerates her. Camilla has always been a little afraid of William.
Prince William stood frozen at the Royal Banquet, then erupted. Before hundreds of dignitaries, Queen Camilla appeared in Catherine's cherished gown, a dress tied to legacy and love. The hall fell silent, jaws dropping as William's fury boiled over. Was this Camilla's defiance, a cruel oversight, or a strategic strike at Catherine's standing? Catherine's supporters bristled, courtiers whispered of humiliation, and William's voice thundered across the room. One thing was clear: this was no accident, and what happens next could change everything. A banquet shattered by a dress. The banquet at Buckingham Palace was supposed to be flawless, a night where tradition and grandeur spoke louder than politics or whispers of uncertainty. Every inch of the great hall had been polished into perfection. Chandeliers glittered like 1,000 stars above, their light dancing across gilded walls. The long tables stretched endlessly, dressed in crisp white linen and laced with garlands of greenery. Silver gleamed with mirror-like precision. Crystal glasses shimmered in the glow of candles, and the soft strains of the orchestra floated through the air, weaving serenity into the scene. Guests arrived in elegant processions, their gowns brushing against marble floors, their tuxedos sharp as blades. Diplomats, dignitaries, and nobles from across the world carried expectant smiles, believing this night would showcase harmony at the heart of the monarchy. But beneath the glittering calm, something unspoken lingered. The anticipation was heavy, like a storm pressing against closed windows. All eyes turned toward the grand double doors, waiting for the royal procession to make its entrance. When the doors finally opened, silence washed through the room. King Charles appeared first, his movements steady, though his face betrayed the quiet weight of recent months. Then, at his side, came Queen Camilla. Her chin was lifted high, her every step deliberate, her presence commanding the space as though it belonged to her alone. At first glance, her gown dazzled, an elegant sweep of silver and white that shimmered beneath the chandeliers like liquid light. The effect was mesmerizing until recognition struck. The shift was instant. Conversations faltered, forks froze midair, even the orchestra's music seemed to hesitate. It was Catherine's gown, the same gown that had once defined a moment in royal history when Catherine, poised and radiant, stepped onto the world stage as the graceful symbol of the monarchy's future. That night, years ago, she had embodied dignity. The dress had ceased to be just fabric. It had become memory, hope, and a vision of continuity. Now it belonged to another. A hush rippled across the hall, broken only by the uneasy shuffle of guests. One aide whispered afterward, "It was as if the dress itself carried a storm." To see it on Camilla was to see history rewritten in real time, a private treasure dragged back into the spotlight under the wrong hands. Courtiers leaned close to one another, muttering beneath their breath. Was this a cruel oversight? A calculated display of power? Or a quiet act of defiance? The uncertainty was more dangerous than the truth, because it allowed everyone to form their own interpretation, and each interpretation stung with its own kind of poison. "Clothes are never just clothes in this family," one official murmured bitterly, eyes locked on Camilla. Across the tables, whispers grew sharp. "That's Catherine's gown, isn't it?" a woman asked, her fingers tightening around her pearls. "Surely not," another replied, though disbelief cracked her voice. Even the servants, trained to move like shadows, exchanged quick glances as they passed, their silence betraying knowledge they dared not voice. When Catherine entered moments later, her composure was immaculate, her smile unbroken, but those who looked closely saw the weight in her eyes, the flicker of pain she buried beneath grace. Every step she took seemed haunted by the sight of her once cherished gown draped across another woman's shoulders. Guests shifted uncomfortably, caught between admiration for her composure and unease at the tension now alive in the room. The banquet, designed as a monument to unity, had instead ripped open old wounds that refused to heal beneath the palace lights. But if the crowd was shaken, how much deeper did the wound cut for William and Catherine within palace walls? Keep watching. When silence burns, louder than words. The Grand Hall of Buckingham Palace had already been pierced by tension the moment Queen Camilla stepped into view, shimmering in the gown that once belonged to Catherine. The air that only minutes earlier carried the perfume of roses and the melody of violins now felt heavy, brittle, waiting to crack. But while the crowd exchanged uneasy glances and whispers darted like shadows along the banquet tables, the sharpest reaction came from one man, the heir to the throne himself. Prince William felt the sight like a sudden blow to the chest. At first, disbelief flickered through him. Perhaps the lights, perhaps his imagination. Yet there was no mistake. He knew every thread of that gown, the embroidery, the delicate folds, the memory sewn into its very seams. It was Catherine's, a relic of a night when she had stood radiant, admired across the world as the face of a modern monarchy. Now, that same gown was draped across another's shoulders, and the symbolism was impossible to ignore. His jaw tightened. The muscles along his face strained as he battled to hold the composure demanded of a future king. But inside, the storm roared. Leaning toward Catherine, his voice cut like glass, though kept low enough to stay hidden beneath the hum of the room. How dare she? That was yours. She's crossed the line. The words hissed through clenched teeth, sharp and controlled, but brimming with fury. Guests near him noticed the sudden stillness in his frame, the intensity of his gaze locked on Camilla like a blade. One guest whispered nervously, "He looks like he's about to erupt." Another added in a hush, "Do you see his hands? They're shaking." And indeed they were. Beneath the table, William's fists clenched so tightly his knuckles blanched white. The fork in his grip trembled against porcelain, producing a faint clink that betrayed the fire raging within. His chest rose and fell with deliberate rhythm, but the anger in his eyes betrayed him. For William, this was no simple breach of etiquette. It was an echo of history. Catherine's gown, worn by Camilla, was not merely an insult. It was a cruel reminder of fractures that had defined his family for decades, a shadow of the pain once endured by his mother, Diana. Catherine, seated beside him, knew the weight of that storm. Tilting her head slightly, her whisper was steady as silk. "Don't make a scene. Not here. We will talk later." Her hand brushed his arm beneath the table, a gesture unseen, yet filled with resolve. She carried herself as marble, smiling politely at guests, nodding to dignitaries, hiding every flicker of pain behind perfect composure. Yet her eyes betrayed what her smile concealed. Each glance at Camilla's gown struck like a blade, reopening memories of the night she had worn it herself. The pride, the applause, the headlines that celebrated her as the new symbol of grace. Now, that memory had been stolen, altered, tainted. Observers saw the unspoken contrast. William's fury burned through his restrained gestures, the stiff shoulders, the thin line of his lips, the vein pulsing in his neck. Catherine's strength glowed through her silence, her refusal to falter. Guests whispered, "Look at him, his face is burning red," while others murmured, "But Catherine, she looks like marble, calm, unshaken." The room began to shape its own narrative. The Prince of Fire and the Duchess of Restraint, locked in a storm no one dared to name aloud. For William, every shimmer of the gown was a provocation, a reminder of the old wounds tied to Camilla's presence. His loyalty to Catherine burned too fiercely to ignore. He thought of his mother, of the years she endured anguish behind palace walls, and vowed in silence, not Catherine, not again. But Catherine's hand against his arm reminded him of the path she had chosen, dignity, not confrontation. And so he swallowed his words, though the effort made his jaw ache. The banquet carried on. Laughter rose, toasts were made, and violins continued to sing. But at the royal table, silence weighed heavier than any speech. It was the silence of love and loyalty, of anger restrained, of wounds not healed but concealed. Together, William and Catherine endured the night, their masks unbroken, their storm invisible to all but those who dared to look closely. Yet beneath the polished surface, the fire smoldered, unquenched, waiting for the moment it could no longer be contained. But in that charged silence, where love clashed with legacy, one question lingered. Whose loyalty would shatter first? William's or Catherine's? Stay tuned. Ghosts in the gown. The tension that gripped Prince William as Camilla appeared in Catherine's gown did not belong to that evening alone. It reached backward, pulling him into memories he had tried to seal away, but which refused to stay buried. Under the glow of Buckingham Palace's chandeliers, he felt the presence of his mother, Diana, as vividly as if she had been standing beside him. Her laughter, her tears, her unshakable smile. All of it came rushing back. Every humiliation she'd endured, every headline that broadcast her pain, seemed to echo in the rustle of that silk now flaunted across the Queen's shoulders. For William, this was not about fashion or etiquette. It was about respect, memory, and wounds that had never healed. It's not the dress, a palace insider would later remark. It's everything the dress represents. William's life had been shaped by the battles that once consumed his parents' marriage. He had watched, as a boy, his mother struggle with betrayal and heartbreak, while Camilla's name hovered like a shadow behind closed doors. Diana had been adored worldwide, compassionate, vulnerable, and strong in ways that transcended her crown. Camilla, by contrast, was branded the intruder, the mistress who haunted a union that should have been whole. Even now, years after Diana's death, the comparison refused to fade. No matter how many smiles Camilla offered in public, no matter how carefully the palace reshaped her image, she remained tethered to that past. For William, the sight of her in Catherine's gown was not only an insult, it was a haunting. A reminder of the nights he had seen his mother weep, the betrayal etched into her spirit, the cruel knowledge that she was never alone in her own marriage. His anger, sharpened by memory, took on the weight of grief. If only she had stayed away, he thought bitterly, his fists tightening under the table until his knuckles whitened. The unspoken belief struck him with merciless force. If Camilla had never been part of their lives, his mother might still be alive. It was a thought that never left him. And that night, under the golden lights of the banquet, it returned with brutal clarity. Yet the story was not his alone. For decades, Camilla had fought her own battle against shadows. To many, she was still the other woman, at one time the most despised figure in Britain. She had clawed her way out of scorn to stand beside Charles as queen consort. But even in victory, she found herself overshadowed again, not this time by Diana, but by Catherine. Catherine's elegance, her warmth, her steady grace drew comparisons to Diana that the public eagerly embraced. And once again, Camilla seemed pushed to the margins, unseen in the glow of another woman's light. Was the gown, then, a desperate rebellion, a way of forcing the spotlight back onto herself? Guests murmured the question in hushed tones, their eyes flicking nervously toward William's clenched jaw. She could have chosen anything. One woman whispered, "Why that gown?" Another shook her head, voice heavy with suspicion. She knew exactly what she was doing. In the royal world, clothes were never just clothes. They were a symbol of power and prestige. They were symbols, weapons, declarations of power. To wear Catherine's gown was to claim a piece of her history, to make a statement no words could soften. For William, it felt like history repeating itself. Another intrusion, another scar. The shimmer of the gown carried not only Catherine's dignity, but also the echo of Diana's suffering. The ghosts of the past pressed hard against the present, and William's fury simmered just beneath his controlled exterior. The banquet continued, its music and laughter painting a veneer of harmony. Yet beneath the glitter, whispers clung to every corner. Guests smiled, glasses clinked, but in William's heart, the past roared alive. What Camilla wore that night was not simply fabric. It was a scar, a reminder that the rivalry between Diana, Catherine, and Camilla had never ended. It stretched across time, binding past and present and leaving the future trembling on its uncertain edge. So how did one gown, stitched with memory and rivalry, reopen Diana's wounds and threaten the monarchy's fragile future? Stay glued. The Banquet of Shadows. The night at Buckingham Palace had begun with splendor, but the moment Queen Camilla entered the grand royal banquet, draped in Catherine's gown, the air shifted. For William, it was not merely a gown. It was a reminder of the scars of his past, of his mother's tears, and of battles long thought buried, but never truly gone. Under the chandeliers, surrounded by foreign dignitaries and courtiers, he felt as though the ghosts of Diana's suffering had been summoned into the room. The murmurs began quietly, but soon the hall rippled with whispers. Why this gown? And why now? William's fury, though silent at first, betrayed itself in every detail. His posture stiffened, his hands clenched, and the faintest twitch of his jaw told a story more powerful than words. The cameras caught it all. The brittle smile, the flashing eyes, the storm gathering behind his mask. Guests shifted uneasily, watching him with the nervous fascination of people sensing an eruption. Catherine, seated beside him in poised silence, placed her hand gently on his knee, a quiet plea for calm. But William's rage was rising too fast for even her steady presence to contain. The banquet rolled on. Music played, glasses clinked, polite laughter filled the gilded space. Yet beneath it all, tension pressed heavier than the velvet drapes framing the walls. Camilla seemed unbothered, her pearls gleaming, her laughter light as she twirled her glass of wine. The gown shimmered, clinging to her like a weapon made of silk, each thread pulling William deeper into a history of betrayal and grief. For the prince, it was more than Catherine's memory being mocked. It was Diana's ghost being provoked. Unable to endure the suffocating weight of it all, William rose abruptly, excusing himself with a curt nod. His footsteps echoed against the palace's marble floors as he sought air, space, anything to release the fury within him. Yet fate, or perhaps design, intervened. Moments later, the sharp click of heels followed him into the corridor lined with oil portraits of monarchs past. Camilla appeared, composed and deliberate, her presence tightening the air between them. When William turned, his voice was low but carried the raw edge of fury. "You knew that was hers," he spat, the words slicing through the silence like a blade. Camilla lifted her chin, folding her arms with calculated poise. Her response was cool, dismissive, even mocking. "It's just a gown, William. Don't be so dramatic." The words broke something inside him. His voice rose, reverberating off the marble walls, a storm unleashed. "Nothing in this family is just anything. Every gesture, every word, every thread we wear is history." That gown was Catherine's memory, and you knew it. His face burned with years of suppressed anger, his fists shaking with the weight of grief and resentment. Camilla's lips curled into a thin smile. "You give ghosts too much power," she replied, pausing as her words dripped with cold precision. Then came the strike. Maybe it's time to stop living in Diana's shadow. The name, his mother's name, hung in the air like a specter. William froze, breath catching as anger and sorrow collided within him. For a moment, he said nothing, the silence louder than his fury. When he finally spoke, his voice broke with emotion. "You will never understand, because you were the cause of her pain, and tonight you disrespected her memory and my wife in front of the world." Camilla faltered. Her mask, so carefully held in place, cracked for the briefest second. Her shoulders stiffened, her eyes narrowed, but there was something unsettled beneath the surface. William, unwilling to continue, stepped back. His silence now was more cutting than his rage. Turning away, he left her standing in the corridor alone, the echoes of her earlier laughter now hollow against the palace walls. When he returned to the banquet hall, Catherine's eyes found him instantly. She read the storm across his face, the tremor in his hands, but also the steel in his step. He sat beside her, breath steadying as the glittering world around them carried on, blind to the confrontation that had just torn open old wounds. Guests laughed, music played and cameras flashed, recording the surface of royalty while missing the fracture beneath. By the time the final carriages rolled past the palace gates, whispers had already slipped into the night. Courtiers hurried to contain the blaze, drafting statements of reassurance. It was a misunderstanding, nothing more. Her Majesty meant no harm, yet even they knew the truth was darker, heavier, impossible to disguise. The story that would reach reporters' ears was simple but explosive. A dress, a prince's fury, and a family once again divided by ghosts that refused to rest. But what did Camilla truly intend by wearing Catherine's gown? An innocent gesture or a calculated strike against history's memory? Stay with us. Threads of pain, shadows of legacy. The grandeur of Buckingham Palace had always been meant to project power, stability, and unity. Yet after that glittering banquet, its gilded walls carried whispers no chandelier could outshine. What was planned as a celebration of tradition dissolved into a storm of tension. At its heart stood a gown heavy with memory, grief, and rivalry. For Prince William, the moment Queen Camilla appeared wearing what once belonged to Catherine was not simply a breach of etiquette. It was a wound torn open, raw and merciless. Even after the last toast and fading notes of music, the air remained heavy. Outside, the city slept. Inside, Buckingham Palace did not rest. William stormed through the private drawing room like a lion in a cage, fists clenched, jaw locked. Each moment from the banquet replayed, the hushed silence, the flickers of recognition on guests' faces, the whispers that spread like wildfire. Most unbearable of all was the sight of Camilla in Catherine's gown, a distortion of history played out before him. Catherine entered quietly, the sweep of her sapphire gown a wave of dignity through the storm. She had seen William in pain before, but this was different. His fury was not only about her, it was about ghosts of the past, scars left by his mother's struggles, and the crushing duty that demanded silence. Placing her hand on his arm, she spoke softly but firmly. "You defended me," she said, "but anger is not our way. We must stand stronger than the games." Her words pierced through, but did not calm him fully. William turned, eyes ablaze and weary, his voice breaking under years of pressure. "How many times must we endure this? First my mother, now you. They provoke, they undermine. And I'm told to smile through it all." His words carried rage, grief, and exhaustion, the burden of being not just a prince but a son, husband and man trapped by duty. Catherine's gaze did not waver. "You are not your father," she whispered. "Do not let bitterness define you. If you break here, they win. We win by rising above." Beyond the doors, staff whispered their impressions. One chambermaid murmured, "It was like watching old wounds bleed again." Everyone knew this was about more than a dress. It was about respect, about Diana. Every public slight seemed to summon her ghost, the people's princess whose tragic story still haunted her sons. To see Camilla wearing Catherine's gown was, for William, to see history mock itself. By morning, the outside world already knew. Headlines screamed, "William's fury at the banquet," "Camilla's gown," "Sparks uproar," "A night of tension behind palace walls." Aides scrambled to draft statements, insisting it was a misunderstanding. But the world had already seen William's clenched jaw, Catherine's fading smile, and the suffocating silence greeting Camilla's entrance. The image was too symbolic, too powerful to erase. And then another ghost surfaced, Harry. Though far away, his accusations of neglect and betrayal suddenly seemed less distant. William had chosen endurance, bound to the crown. Harry had chosen rebellion. Yet now, William could not escape the question. Had his brother been right all along? As dawn broke, William sat alone, bathed in pale moonlight. His chest ached with the clash between rage and restraint, duty and love. Catherine's warning echoed like a bell. If you break here, they win. Within the palace, one whispered remark cut to the heart of it all. This family is held together by threads, and those threads are fraying. The palace glittered in the sun, but beneath its surface lay fractures deep and unhealed. The gown had become more than fabric. It was a symbol, a reminder that the wounds of the past still breathed, and that the shadow of Diana lingered, shaping the present in ways no crown could contain. So what do you think lies beneath the palace's glitter? Can these fraying threads survive, or is the monarchy facing a quiet, unstoppable fracture? Keep watching. Shadows of a divided crown. The palace gates had scarcely closed behind the final guest before the outside world erupted in uproar. By dawn, newspapers from London to New York screamed with scandal. One headline sneered, "Queen Camilla or Copycat Camilla," while another blared, "William's fury at banquet boils over." The photographs alone captured the fracture. Camilla draped in Catherine's iconic gown, William's jaw set like stone, and Catherine smiling faintly, her grace barely disguising the hurt beneath. What followed was relentless. Television panels churned with arguments. One commentator shrugged, insisting Camilla was queen now and free to wear whatever she wished. Another shot back with words that cut deeper. "This isn't about fabric. This is about history. That gown was Catherine's symbol, and now it feels like theft in plain sight." Social media boiled over in hashtags. Hashtag Team Catherine, hashtag Queen Camilla, hashtag Royal Respect, splitting public opinion into warring camps. Some defended Camilla as a woman who had fought for her place and finally claimed it. Others rallied around Catherine, portraying her as a grace wronged by arrogance. In pubs, on trains, and across office corridors, the debate raged. "Camilla has earned her crown. Let her wear it," one woman declared. "No," another countered sharply. "You don't wear another woman's crown, and you certainly don't wear her gown." For the monarchy, this was more than gossip. Every silence spoke volumes. Every choice became a weapon. Palace aides scrambled to contain the blaze. Carefully worded statements were drafted, explaining that the Queen's gown had come from the royal collection, a gesture of continuity, not conflict. Yet behind gilded doors, no press release could calm the storm. William's fury only deepened with each headline mocking him as overzealous. each whisper that his loyalty to Catherine was weakness. By evening, he stormed into his father's study, the corridors silent as though they carried the weight of secrets. His words were sharp, carrying pain that only a son scarred by his mother's memory could voice. "You allow her to humiliate Catherine. Do you even see it?" Charles, weary from decades of battles, raised his eyes, his reply heavy with resignation. "This family has survived worse. Do not tear it apart further." But William would not yield. His fists clenched, not in rage, but in desperation. It is not survival if it comes at the cost of respect. Mother was disrespected her whole life in this family. I will not let Catherine suffer the same fate. His voice quivered, not with weakness, but with the burden of memory. Charles leaned back, exhaustion etched into every line of his face, while William stood firm, refusing to let history repeat itself. Outside, the scandal raged on, but within the palace, the divide grew sharper. A staff member whispered in the courtyard. It was never just about the dress. It was about Diana, about Catherine, about respect. And while William seethed, Catherine endured differently. Her strength lay not in anger, but in composure. To a confidant, she confessed, "If I crumble, the children crumble. I must be their calm, even in this storm." Her quiet dignity steadied the family even as William's rage and Camilla's defiance pulled the walls tighter around them. What was meant to be a night of unity had become something far darker. A reminder that for the House of Windsor, every gown, every gesture, every silence carries the weight of history. And now, the question that lingered was no longer about etiquette, but about survival. Could the monarchy stand when even its most celebrated faces were divided against one another? So what do you think? Was Camilla's choice an innocent gesture or a deliberate challenge to Catherine's legacy? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.